There are 2 weeks left for Comic Book Community Award nominations. Consider 9-panel grid for Best New Channel and Best Reviews. Links down in the description below. Another Wednesday's come and gone, and I've got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9-panel grid. This week, we've seen bureaucratic superheroics, godforsaken deities, and a hero, singular, in a half shell. But we're going to kick things off this week with Blood Squad 7, number 3, written by Joe Casey with artwork by Paul Fry. So this is the continuing look of a superhero team in the media spotlight. They're really just kind of like in the landscape of everything that's happening political and everything in society. All eyes are really on them. And this is a really fun issue and a really fun series so far as we see kind of the background events of what's happening and who's really driving the superhero team. And it's really this very modern look at how a superhero team maybe would navigate in today's landscape. I really love what Joe Casey's doing here. It's continued to be this great meta narrative about a couple different things, about kind of media in our modern age, as well as a mix of kind of that 90s extreme viewpoints, especially with image comics, and it's kind of melded together. This issue has seen the team that's been put together, and they have now seen that they need to go after one of their own, as there has been some um, unsavory things, we'll say, that he's been doing here, and they got to put him down before before the greater society starts to understand what he's doing, and before it gets onto the news channels and gets into everyone's viewpoints. So it's a really cool, interesting look at some of the shady underbellies of what could be happening with some of these superhero teams. Really effective writing, really great artwork by Paul Fry, and really just a fantastic issue on this continuing series. So I can't wait to see what they do next. Next up, we have Berserker, A Face Full of Bullets, number 1, written by Jason Aaron with artwork by Francesco Manna. So this is a one-shot in the world of Berserker, and we really see Keanu's character kind of take his roots within the Wild West, right? That kind of time era, Civil War time, basically. And I love what Jason Aaron is doing on this issue. This is really the same Jason Aaron that we've seen recently in things like his Punisher run. This is the Jason Aaron that is really firing on all cylinders in the same way that he did with Southern Bastards. This is like an unchained version of him where he holds nothing back. And this issue is absolutely bloody and brutal and brings in religious aspects that we've seen Jason Aaron dabble with here and there, especially with books like The Goddamned. And he's playing with some of these notions and definitely ramping up the violence to 11, considering it's a Berserker book. Really, really awesome, entertaining stuff. Now, the artwork on here is by far, in my opinion, the best we've seen of any Berserker book that's come out here. Francesco Manna has a realistic approach to his artwork that is really fascinating, especially considering that the namesake character, B, the Berserker, is modeled after Keanu Reeves. It feels like Keanu Reeves through and through, more so than any other artist's rendering of him. It has kind of a flair and a tone akin to like a Salvador Larroca. That's not to say it's exactly like carbon copy like him. It's something unto itself as well. But if you can imagine that, you're going to get kind of what the artistic approach is going to be here. So this sees B, the main character, get pulled into a skirmish between a daughter who is trying to basically leave behind her family, leave behind her upbringing, and start living her own life. The unfortunate truth is that there are some bloody consequences that come along with that, and B is there to right the wrongs. So really cool exploration. Like I said, really ramps up the violence in this issue here. And they effectively really do what the original Berserker series, the 12 issues, did, and distilled it down to its purest form and delivered it within one single issue. Really fantastic stuff, but if you picked it up, let me know what you're thinking. Next issue up, we have Conan number 13, written by Jim Zub with artwork by Doug Braithwaite. So we've kind of gone through the first year of having Conan back in our lives with the Titan imprint, and this is the beginning of the next volume of his adventures. And we get to actually take a step backwards as we're starting an adventure now in Conan's past. Really cool callbacks that we've seen in this issue. There's been some callbacks, in fact, to the very first issue of Conan that's came out from Titan, where we get to explore a little bit of Conan's youth in a couple different aspects, both as a child and as a young man. We see him kind of starting to develop a notion of Crom, right, and his belief structure, and really testing, why it is that something that is unseeing and unknowing watches over them and has power over them. He's really putting the notion of Crom to test here, and I love the how that's really fleshing out the character of Conan, and how if it's not tangible, if he can't strike a sword through it, basically, it might not be something that's worthwhile to him. But I love the way that the story kind of revolves around that and molds around that, and especially when you see Conan as a child, the way that his the way that his upbringing influenced him and how he influenced the elders as well as a child. Really awesome exploration of the character. Now, Roberto Della Toro is the one that's normally on the Conan book, but he's been switching on and off between arcs with Doug Braithwaite. And I think that this is a really great time for Doug Braithwaite to be on the story. It's we're taking a new look at the character. We're going into a completely different time frame for the character, and this is a great time for his artwork to really take hold on here, because I think it is very much different than what we get from De La Torre, but it's of the same ilk and definitely of the same quality. So I really love that he's back on this book, and he's going to have an arc to really flesh out Conan in a much more different way than what we've seen recently. So overall, Conan continues to be an absolutely extraordinary book here, and I can't wait to hear what you thought about it. All right, moving from Samaria to Gotham City, let's talk Detective Comics 1087, written by Ram V with artwork by Christian Deuce. So this is a great exploration of Batman the character as he's come back from having the asthma having a hold on his mind and his sanity, and we've taken a couple issues now of kind of letting him regain his footing, and it's kind of bogged things down a little bit. But this issue takes the fight back to the Orgums as Batman tries to regain control of his city. We've seen a lot of the other ancillary players in the Batman family start to actually get a spotlight shown on them. And we've also seen other people that we don't necessarily expect to team up with Bruce start to be main players within this story as well. We see some really great interactions with Harvey Dent. We see some really great interactions with Victor Fries. But I think the most interesting aspect of this is really coming from the geopolitical structure of Gotham City. We see Gotham City PD, we see the mayor, we see the political structure basically start to understand and realize that Gotham needs Batman. He is a necessary evil per se in order to fight the things that are trying to take hold of the city itself. Really great exploration. It's really ramping up for the finale of this series, all in all. And I really just love what Ram V is doing with these secondary characters. Again, some of them that I've already mentioned here, but an interaction between Nightwing and Azrael when he's donned in his Batman suit. That's, clearly they were butting heads back in the 90s when Nightfall happened, and that continues to be a notion that's explored here. But really great character study on what they're doing and how their relationship has evolved, or maybe not so much evolved. Really great stuff that Ram V is doing. With 2 issues left, he is definitely setting the stage for a grand finale. Moving from one detective to another, let's talk Dick Tracy #3, written by Michael Morisi and Alex Segura, with artwork by Geraldo Borges. So this series so far has been a slow burn, but I feel like with issue #3, we're starting to see a little bit more of the structure of how they're going to take this series moving forward. This issue in particular is the continuing investigation of some of the murders that have taken place within Dick Tracy's city, but this was just like an action-packed issue. This is kind of them putting the detective back into the story, while maintaining a nice pace and keeping up some of the action beats that are necessary to kind of, keep it an entertaining singular issue itself. So we see Dick Tracy and his team go to the docks basically to start investigating what they think is going to be a drug running and gun running facility, just to find out that maybe there's some inner workings within Dick Tracy's police force where they're maybe feeding the criminals some information. There might be an inside man involved with all of this, and it might go even higher than Dick Tracy even anticipates. So really cool corruption angle that they're playing with, really great story beats. I love the action in this issue, and I definitely love the investigation factor, because when it comes down to it, Dick Tracy starts to realize that he maybe needs to step outside of the notion that the law is the law, and he needs to put his trust in the people that he absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, knows he can trust. So this series is evolving, and I think it's evolving in a really fantastic way. This has been, in my opinion, the most effective issue that Dick Tracy has put out thus far. I told myself I wasn't going to do this. I promised myself I wasn't going to do this. And yet here we are, reviewing The Nice House by the Sea, #1, written by James Tynion with artwork by Alvaro Bueno. I just got drawn right back into it. I just couldn't resist the siren call of this series, as The Nice House by the Lake started off in such a fantastic manner. I needed to dive back into this to see what the heck was going on in this world, and if it was something that maybe could get its hooks back in me. I think it did, though. This series is kind of dependent on your knowledge of The Nice House by the Lake. We see kind of the series taking the same steps, basically, the same notions and the same explorations, with a different set of people that are involved now. We know that the world is ended. We know that these alien creatures are basically taking other individuals and keeping them almost in a habitat like way. But where Nice House by the Lake took a more emotional stake with the people that were chosen, a more personal stake, we're now seeing something that is more akin to choosing the best and brightest. Don't know if it's necessarily to repopulate the world or for other nefarious purposes, but we do know that they're trying to choose the best and brightest, not based on their relationships with the main character alien or relationships with each other. They're just trying to choose who is going to be the best at their given field. That definitely leads to some interesting character moments within this book, as everyone seems to be wanting to bump heads, because if you're the greatest in any field, you tend to be a little bit competitive as well. So we're starting to see some of those competitive notions really take hold here. James Tynion, man, he just really knows how to tell a compelling first issue, and he really knows how to get someone's interests and pull you in. It's worked on me before. The issue I'm going to have is that, is this going to be something that I continues to hold my interest moving forward, as there has been more than one James Tynion series that has kind of fallen to the wayside for me at this point. Sometimes they get picked up again, sometimes not so much. But what I can say is, for issue 1, it was extraordinarily entertaining. The artwork was just fantastic, and the colors. The colors are really what brought this book to life. I think it was probably the best colored book of the week so far. And it's really maybe what kept me turning the page over and over and over. So, James, you did it. I'm along for the ride here, and I can't wait to see what issue 2 holds. And with a new #1 from the Ashes of Krakoa, let's talk NYX #1, written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lanzig, with artwork by Francesco Mortorino. So this is kind of a rebranded Miss Marvel book, for lack of a better term, as she is definitely the main player of this story. This takes place obviously after Krakoa's demise, and we see that Kamala is back in New York City, going back to school as a college student, and she has interactions with other people, that are more widely known as mutants, as one of the Stepford Cuckoos is a main player. Laura X-23 Wolverine is one of the main players here. And it's definitely a more youth-oriented book. It is definitely aimed for people of a certain age group. And the unfortunate truth is that while I've really loved Kelly and Lanzig's writing in the past on more than one series, the approach here just feels juvenile. And I feel bad for saying that, because I definitely do know that this is a youth-centered book, but the it just feels hokey. And I hate that while some of the charm of Kamala as a character is her naivety, she feels extraordinarily naive in this book, so much to the point where it makes you kind of roll your eyes a little bit, where you have to say, come on, like let's show a little bit of growth as a character here. Also, some of the ancillary players here, while and the Stepford Cuckoo character is one of the central role characters, we see Laura Kinney right there on the cover, and she has nothing better to do than show up on the scene and tell Kamala to stay out of this business. And then she disappears. It was just such a wasted page, basically, of something that could have had a little bit better motivation behind it. Overall, I just got to say, this issue was really clunky. It's been my least favorite of the new number ones of the X Line relaunch so far. And I gotta say, like, this has put such a bad taste in my mouth. I'm not sure if I'm going to be around for issue number two. With that being said, the artwork on here is really the brightest spot of the book. I think that it's something akin to kind of the Marvel House style right now. Keeps the pages flowing. The pacing is very nice. The layouts are perfectly fine here. Nothing to write home about, but definitely I don't have anything bad to say about the artwork whatsoever. But the narrative structure definitely leaves something to, I don't know, leave something to that's needed within this book. So if you read NYX number one and you had a different opinion, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. And next up, let's talk Rook Exodus number 4, written by Jeff Johns with artwork by Jason Fabok. Oddly enough, the first thought that comes to mind for this book is that it is the absolute best Big Two book that's coming out right now. Only problem is, it's not coming out from the Big Two, it's coming out from Image. But it's the most comic booky comic that's hitting stands right now, and I kind of love it for that. So we continue to be with our main character, Rook, as right now he is working with his previous trainer when the world that they were on was still kind of a functioning place. The Dire Wolf is with him, and they're trying to kind of basically protect the world engine right now that is allowing them to keep their helmets and keep their communication efforts with the animal beings that are on this world. It's under attack by people that are specifically targeting the wardens like Rook and Direwolf and taking their helmets so that they can use them for their own nefarious purposes. Super comic booky notion right there, right? Speaking to animals, having these people come after them, this fight for this ending world that's happening. All the while, there's these fantastic battle scenes that are happening between this person that can speak and control the crows, boars, wolves, turtles. It's just action set pieces over and over and over on every single page that you're on. With an artist like Jason Fabok on a book like this, you have to imagine that this just gives him every opportunity to really kind of just like stretch out and play with a lot of different notions, because man, there's so many different angles that he chooses, and there's so many different approaches that he takes to some of these battle scenes that are really striking and really fantastic. Again, it's the best way I could put this is it's the most comic booky comic book that you could be reading right now. Every notion is over the top. Everything is bombastic. And I say that in the absolute best way possible. This was such a fun read. And it's just something that I've come to really love it more and more as each issue has been presented here. This is definitely still within that same vein here. I love this issue. It's really great. And I can't wait to hear what your thoughts were about it. Next up, we have The Sacrificers, number 10, written by Rick Remender with artwork by Andre Araujo. This is the first issue of the new artist taking over on The Sacrificers, while Max Fiumara is kind of, taking a little bit of a break. And I gotta say, the artistic quality still remained at an all-time high with this. So this issue kind of sees the daughter character of these two godly beings, being the sun and the moon, as she's been completely depowered. And I love the exploration that Rick Remender takes us on. He is never one that shies away from big ideas, and he's never one that shies away from bold ideas that can really challenge the reader, I guess I should say. The way that we look at this is that we have this godly character who's never known strife, who's never known need or want, even at this point. Everything has been right there presented to her at a moment's notice whenever she needs it. And she's never known anything outside of being worshipped. Being that she's depowered and living amongst the people of the land, now she's in a very real spot where she needs things to survive. And at every corner, the people that are meant to worship her, being that she is the daughter of gods, turn their backs on her. And turning their backs on her is the nicest way I can put it in some of these circumstances. It's really just such a challenging way of looking at, not just the society within the comic book, but sometimes the very real society that we live in right here and right now. How, we can turn our backs on one another. And I just love the way that Rick Remender really explores that idea and that notion, and how it really comes to kind of show the hypocrisy amongst some groups of people. Really fantastic look at all that kind of stuff. The artwork, again, big, bold. It's not bright by any means, especially considering that the notion of this entire issue is kind of a downer, if I'm being honest, right? The color palette that's chosen in this definitely matches the feeling that's being conveyed through the writing and through the artwork. So I think it's a really effective issue. It's a really great exploration of this character, especially now that she has been depowered. It's really kind of the juxtaposition between her and Pigeon, who has now regained power and has completely taken an attitude shift on everything. I love the cliffhanger at the end of this issue again, by the way, and I think it's something that is going to be played with in such fantastic ways. This was absolutely one of the best issues that have come out this week so far. And with our next issue, we have The Six Fingers #5, written by Dan Waters with artwork by Sumit Kumar. So we finally reached the end of this epic 2 series that are one, being the One Hand and the Six Fingers. And I gotta say, this was such an effective kind of single issue, but also kind of a look back as it's at its companion piece and as a series as a whole. And kind of making sure that it allows you to recontextualize everything that's happened now that all of the mysteries have essentially been unraveled and represented to you. So this is the look at the killer character, and not only that, but the artist character that has kind of, become his companion, and some of the ways that this journey has changed them as people, and some of the ways that the way that the city has manipulated them, both in a very real and a very metatextual way. It's a really great exploration of that idea. Not only that, but seeing some of the other sides of interactions between Ari, the detective character, in the one hand, and our killer character within this story, seeing how the different side of that conversation takes place and having a better understanding of the notion behind things that are being said was a really, really awesome look at how seeing things from both sides can really expand your vision fully with having that full understanding. I think that Ram V and Dan Waters really did something special with this, with the entirety of this series, and this was just the absolute perfect end cap to kind of put everything back in place and to really fully visualize the stakes that were at play, and how each character was maybe the hero of their own story, the villain of the other story, but they were never truly the main character of either story whatsoever. Awesome interpretation of everything. It was just a really effective, fantastic series and set of series through and through. And with our next issue, we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, written by Jason Aaron with artwork by Joelle Jones. This was an interesting issue. I dove in because I definitely have a love for the property that is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I've definitely been a lapsed reader for a very long time. But with a writer like Jason Aaron coming on board, it was enough of, a kind of a kick to get me back into this series and kind of see what was happening. And it was kind of an interesting notion as reading up on this series. It kind of said, like, hey, we're not going to get rid of all the previous continuity. This isn't a retelling of the origin story. It's kind of a good jumping on point. So I tried to look at it from that notion. And I have to say, from a jumping on perspective, I don't know how effective this issue was. Now, speaking of the issue, it says Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the title, but the reality is, this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. We only follow Raphael throughout the entirety of this issue. And the entire issue doesn't take place in New York City. In fact, it takes place in California, in a prison throughout the entirety of it. Now, we don't know why Raphael is there. We kind of have a good understanding of his purpose, that why he is there, because he's Raph, and Raph is the the one that basically takes on crime head first and kind of thinks after the fact, right? He's an action first kind of person. And it just doesn't do a really effective job of kind of telling the story of how he got here, why he's there, and kind of why he's split up from his brothers, and maybe why his brothers are just apart from him in general. Like, we're across the entire country and there's no notion as to why. I don't know. It was a little bit clunky. The narrative of the story is good. Like, I mean, it tells the story effectively. It just doesn't give us enough meat on the bone to understand why we're there and how we got there and why this is the jumping off point. In fact, it feels more of a prelude than anything, but we already had a prelude a couple weeks ago with one of these issues. So, all in all, it's a little bit clunky. We didn't get Ninja Turtles as I feel like we were promised we were going to get Ninja Turtles. Maybe this is something that could be further fleshed out in future issues, but as a new number one, I can't say that this was all that effective. Next up, we have Ultimate Black Panther number 6, written by Brian Edward Hill with artwork by Carlos Nito. This book needs to pick up the pace, if I'm being completely honest. It has kind of lost the swing of things, right? I feel like we had a good bouncy pace to what was happening in the previous issues, and we saw that T'Challa was struggling with being a king, a new king. We saw that T'Challa was struggling with the balancing act of being a king and being the Black Panther and investigating some of these things, and everything was really flowing well until maybe the last issue and then into this issue. I feel like we're exploring things that are really fun ideas and really cool notions, like the kind of the idea of religion and the idea of your belief structure and your the notion of putting your faith into things. And I feel like we're dancing around and we're tiptoeing around these ideas, but we're not fully exploring them to the full gravity that they could. And maybe they're going to explore that in the next upcoming issues here, but that's been the primary focus, especially on this issue, as we see Ra and Khonshu basically starting to take the fight more and more into Wakanda as they are trying their best to get this new mineral or material, basically, which is the yin and yang between this and vibranium. But what they're doing is they're pulling in, the people, basically, not just of Wakanda, but of Africa itself. And it's playing with some of the same notions that we've come to know Killmonger to do, even within this Ultimate Universe. He's a man amongst the people, and the Moon Knight character himself is kind of recontextualized as that in that same vein, however, using it for nefarious purposes, as we, the reader, know. But again, that's some of those tiptoey notions here. And T'Challa, like, take some action. It's time to take some action on this, because we've spent the last couple issues just kind of being drugged down in the mud, right? Where we're taking slow steps here, and like we need to get to the point where we're sprinting now. That's where I'm at with Ultimate Black Panther as a whole. I do think that the artwork was really well done here. I think that the colors have been fantastic. However, the narrative structure is really just kind of bogging it down just a little bit. That's not to say it's been like that from the beginning, though, and I have full faith that Brian Edward Hill can right the ship and get us back to a more brisk pace with this book. We just kind of need to see some of those actions take place moving forward. Speaking of a brisk pace, let's talk Uncanny Valley number 4, written by Tony Fleeks with artwork by Dave Wachter. So that's been this series through and through. Every issue is just like real brisk. Like, we get from start to finish as quickly as possible without missing too many beats in between. It's been really effective in knowing how to get the story moving and going at the pace that's needed. This issue, we kind of see Oliver and his grandfather character trapped between these two, well, basically the grandfather character's notion of handing Oliver over to save the cartoon world and handing him over to the nefarious beings who happen to be the ones that he was fighting against from the get-go. So it seems like there is definitely some confusion amongst how to best save the community that is the cartoon world. Lo and behold, come to save the day is the mother character here, and we kind of see an exploration from her perspective as she grew up with her father, the cartoon character, how they grew apart, and how the cartoon notions, some of the fun things in this book, kind of like the laws of how cartoons work, really worked against her as a child, and then growing up as an adult, as the same things that would bring a cartoon character joy or compassion or love or just, I don't know, security, don't really play the same way for humans as maybe they do for cartoon characters. That was the most effective part of this issue, is that exploration, but the rest of it kind of feels a little bit samey. I think we need to get to the point now where we're at the end of the arc, where we're starting to see whether Oliver is going to either take on a change upon himself or he's going to be handed over. One of those two things definitely needs to happen within this next issue so that we can kind of keep that same pace going over and over. But right now, this was a pretty darn good, effective issue. I think that the series overall has been mostly pretty good. I wanted to take that step up, though, to where it becomes something that it could be great. Next up, we have Zatanna, Bring Down the House, #2, written by Mariko Tamaki with artwork by Javier Rodriguez. So this has been a really fun exploration of the character of Zatanna herself, and being that this is a Black Label book, it doesn't need to be mired in continuity, and it can kind of really tell its own story. And with this issue 1 and this issue, we've really explored that, as it kind of takes a look back at Zatanna's upbringing, some of the mistakes maybe that she had made in her past, and the way that her parentage has also influenced her. This issue has definitely been like the exposition-y kind of issue, as they kind of explore some of the notions of what has happened in the past, some of the notions of Zatanna as a character and her magical upbringing, and it's kind of playing with the hierarchy of magic, basically. And what I really love about this is that we have the reluctant hero story, as Zatanna does not want to use magic. She's seen the consequences that magic can bring. She's also seen that sometimes it's going to have to be relied upon. The other side is that we have this secondary character as well, who's kind of like the secondary lead in the story, who is within the magical hierarchy. She's kind of the one that's investigating the things that are happening right now, and Zatanna is almost the reluctant sidekick right now. But those roles, they're going to be shifting here definitely sometime in the near future, as Zatanna starts to take hold of the magical abilities that she has. Really fun. It's a fun story. Like it's a really good character study that's not bogged down with some of the things that are happening in the greater DC continuity. And I think that Javier Rodriguez's artwork is absolutely the best suited for a story like this. I think it keeps a classic comic book feel while continuing to pull through like some modern notions, right? Some of the ways that he lays out a page, some of the ways that he shows the magic actually being used. Really great stuff here. Color again is also fantastic. I think that Javier, when paired with the right colorist, really can do, pun intended, magic here. So Zatanna #2, really great story. I think that this is building issue after issue into something that's really fantastic. And with our runner-up pick of the week, let's talk Flash Gordon #1, written by Jeremy Adams with artwork by Will Conrad. This came out of nowhere. I wasn't even anticipating reading this book, let alone reviewing it. And I gotta say, I was blown away. I don't have any background on Flash Gordon. In fact, my only background is knowing that Star Wars took influence from Flash Gordon. That's the extent of my background. But I gotta say, this makes me want to explore that world and these characters so much more. This issue is essentially a prison break issue, and it's a fairly decent issue at introducing some of the characters of the Flash Gordon world, but it doesn't necessarily fully flesh things out. It gives you enough of a feel of the Flash character to kind of know some of the abilities that he has and some of the actions that he's going to take place. He's definitely the heroic character of this story, not bumbling by any means. He's a person that can kind of like take action like at a moment's notice. And I don't know, it was just a really fun sci-fi epic adventure that I can't wait to see unfold. Being that this was a prison break, we get introduced to some of these side characters, but it's mostly by way of the a side character explaining where people are in the history of Flash Gordon to Flash as he is in prison right now. Of course, he breaks out once he hears some of the bad news that's happening here, that bad news being an assassination plot. But it's just a really fun way of, again, recontextualizing and modernizing this very classic character. And when I say modernizing, what I'm really looking at is more so the artistic aspect than the narrative aspect, as Will Conrad's artwork is really bold and bright, and it looks fantastic. It has the flair of a classic comic book, but kind of with more modern artistic technique that's put behind it. I think it's really great the way that he kind of took some of these old school sci-fi tropes, but didn't make them so old school and sci-fi that they were almost hokey. It felt like something that would be within the world that's being developed right here. So I thought that the pairing of Adams and Conrad was just like stupendous. And I think that they're crafting something that could be really one of the flagships of this new imprint that they have at Mad Cave with all these different licensed characters. This is going to be something to look out for, and I can't wait to see where they continue to take this character. And with our top comic of the week, let's talk Epitaphs from the Abyss, #1, written by a variety of writers, drawn by a variety of artists. So this was an anthology issue, and it's going to be an anthology series that is kind of akin to a Tales from the Crypt kind of approach. And I got to be honest, I loved that so much. This was not bogged down by anything like continuity. It wasn't bogged down by having to know what the characters were doing, where they were going, what was going to be happening. This was, you get 5 pages telling a story in the most effective way possible, and they hit on all cylinders. So there's a couple different stories that are taking place here. One of them revolving around kind of a disgruntled, struggling writer, and how sometimes the notions of things that come easy to others don't always come easy to those that are really working their hardest to find them. There's bloody consequences that come along with that, with with this writer that thinks so highly of himself and really so low of everyone else, in comparison to what he thinks his abilities are. There is definitely some things that are going to strike a nerve with people. This is not a book that necessarily tiptoes around the feelings of the reader, specifically when it comes to politics. There's some notions that they play with that are going to strike a nerve with people, but I think it's going to strike a nerve in the best way possible, as that's what these books are supposed to do, right? These are supposed to really play with those notions. They're supposed to like trigger you in a lot of different ways. So I would hope that people don't take those things in a certain way, but that's not to say that they won't. I think it's truly effective. We'll see how the general populace feels about that, though. Again, this was just a litany of really fun stories, drawn fantastically, written fantastically, and if they keep up this pace, this could be one of those really fun stories that you continue to go back to over and over and over, in the same way that the Tales from the Crypt TV show gave you episodic things that like really took hold in your brain and really created memories that you hold on to decades later. I can't wait to see where they take this. I can't wait to see the changing creative teams, as long as the quality stays as high as it is for this new issue #1. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read and what were your thoughts? Be part of the panel, leave me a comment down below, and do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next week.